Hello and welcome to Learning Outcomes Leaders, brought to you by Genio. I'm James.
And I'm Scott, and on this podcast, you'll hear us chatting to higher education professionals who can talk the talk about how they've been there and done it.
We'll discuss some of their proudest and most ambitious projects and explore the most effective ways in which they've helped to improve and elevate their students' experience. In this episode, we're joined by Avery Cook, Head of Accessibility Services at St Cloud Technical and Community College, to discuss the delicate balance when supporting disabled students in the K-12 to higher education transition. We'll explore the transition from high school IEPs to college expectations and why true college readiness is defined by the ability to ask for help, not just academic skills. Want to find out more? Let's get into the episode.
How we typically start the podcast is we love hearing about how you got to where you are today. So
Totally.
the question is, what's your origin story or formative educational experience? But effectively, like what got you here? Like, why do you want to do this? And what was the driving force to get you to where you are today?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. And I'm gonna start with the answer is my mom. So my mom is my origin story because my mom, I was a young disabled child, right? So I have autism, I have ADHD, and when I was sent, I have an older brother and he has those diagnoses as well. And my mom did not let us be disabled. And not in a way that was like, oh, like, sorry, we don't believe in that. It was tough. And so that's kind of my origin story is that I had a mom who really just kicked me in the ass. And when it came to like, I was really struggling with things or this was really hard, my mom was very like, yep, I get that it's hard. I hear that. You need to work for it. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be challenging. That doesn't mean that there might be things that you have to change, right? Those accommodation things, which I didn't have the language for back then, right? But you can do it, right? And when I started growing up and realizing that I am in such a fantastic place because I had that person in my life where so many people who have disabilities didn't. You know, so many people had those maybe parents who were like, oh, you're disabled. I am going to wrap you in bubble wrap and you will never experience hardship. And I will make sure that I will fight all of your battles and I will do all of this for you. And when I was little, my mom fought my battles, right? When I was a little kid. But when I was even in middle school, she started saying, like, well, have you talked to your teachers about that? You know, I would come home and I'd be like, Mom, this isn't fair. And she'd be like, did you talk to your teachers? And I'd be like, yeah, totally. And she'd be like, have them sign a piece of paper saying that you talked to them about it. And then if I get that piece of paper signed back and it still isn't resolved, I will go talk to them. And some people don't have that in one way or the other, where their parents might not be supportive at all, right? Where it's like tough boots, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And then you have like I said, the bubble wrap parents, where it's like, I don't ever want you to experience any type of negativity. And I feel very lucky to have had that parent who made me face the reality of being disabled but safely over time. And so when I started PSEO, which is a thing here where it's like basically you can start school or college and high school for free. And I started PSEO when I was in my senior year and of high school. And basically I just started taking classes in history because I was like, well, I don't know what else I want to do. And I'm a big history nerd. So I'm just going to do that. And I got my bachelor's degree in history with a certificate in museology, the study of museums. Um, and I realized that that's not what I want to do because I picked my major when I was 16 years old and my brain was not developed in the slightest. So when I was done with my bachelor's degree, I went for my master's degree in rehabilitation counseling, which is specifically surrounding like counseling for people with disabilities. And that is, again, the reason for that was because when I was complaining to my mom, what do I do with my life? She goes, do the thing you're passionate about. And I have a minor in American Sign Language. And she was like, you care about that. Go do something with it. And I've always been interested in psychology. So I got my master's degree. And while I was working in my master's degree, I started working as a graduate assistant in our accessibility services office within my institution. And it just kind of all went from there, where I was seeing students who, like I was talking about at the beginning here, is like that didn't have the experience I had, who are like, well, what do you mean? I never had to take a math class in high school at all. Like, I have a math learning disability and I just never had to do that. And I went, huh? Your mom didn't strap you down to the table and say, I know it's going to be hard, but figure it out. Like, and they're like, no, my mom said that I shouldn't have to. And so now I want to be an accountant because I know accountants make money, but I haven't taken a math class since I was 14. And I went, well, that's probably not the right path for you, right? And seeing that there are those students who need that, and the phrasing I use here is like sometimes you need tough love and sometimes you need snuggle love. And we in student affairs, I think there's a lot of pressure, which is crazy. I think there's a lot of pressure for snuggle love. I think there's a lot of pressure to be, especially with students with disabilities, is that you have to kind of hold them with kid gloves or like that bubble wrap idea. And I think at my last institution, with among students at least, I can't tell you what the staff thought of me, but among students, they were like, Avery kind of sucks, but in a way that the minute I'm done with that meeting where she tells me to kind of like, hey, this is the world you're in, let's focus, they come back to me weekly going, girl, let me tell you what this happened. And I'd be like, yeah, girl, that sucks. Here's how we can handle that together because they're learning too. And so there's no point kicking them off the deep end and saying, see you later, like, have a good day. The important thing is that we are there and able to support them. And I fell in love with that. I fell in love with it, seeing students who were like me that I identified with, even if it's not disability specific or the same, but I remember that moment where I transferred from high school to college. I remember that moment in middle school where my mom literally, and I'm not even kidding you guys, my mom literally made me take a piece of paper to my teachers to have them initial that I talked to them so that I started that self-advocacy journey with accountability, right? And at the time, did I absolutely hate her for that? Yes. And you know what? This is my public apology to my mom. Um, but those accountability structures when I was, 11 made such a difference. And to be able to support students who, again, might not have had the access to those things, and for them to have a safe place where it's like, I am a neurodivergent. I've had that experience, even if it's, different than mine. Like, I can empathize, I can relate. You're never going to get judgment from me when it doesn't work. You're never going to catch it. You're never going to catch a case from me when you say, Avery, I tried and I got embarrassed and I flaked. Yep, that happens. I'm glad that you tried. I'm glad that you got all the way up to about to send the email. It's a huge step. So, long story long, I can yap forever, but that's kind of how I got here. And, all thanks to my mom. Shout out Dana Cook.
I love that story. It resonates with me hugely. I have dyslexia, and my parents, it's probably more so from like a lack of knowledge or experience around the case, but it was kind of like, that's nothing. Don't worry, you can still do what
Yeah,
everybody else does. Don't worry about it. And at points in my life, I thought that maybe I would have benefited from maybe someone being a little bit more understanding and, like you said, that fuzzy love. But
yep,
the level which I've benefited from actually being a stubborn working class boy who can do anything that he wants to do
yep.
is so valuable. And I'm sure James will attest to me at work. I might spell every single message wrong, but if you can work out what I'm trying to say, it's right. Like
Oh yeah.
there's
Yes.
to this point, to this day, I don't care now if it's spelt wrong, but you can figure it out. That's all right, cool. You figure it out.
Yeah,
But there's my parents instilled like a really good self-advocacy for myself and my learning differences when I got put into, I was getting taken out of math classes so I could go to dyslexia-led classes, and this was
sure.
bloody 20 years ago, right? So it was when there was like a one size fits all for support for students who had a neurodiversity. Um, and that one size fits all for me was lower on what from than what I needed. So I always felt like I never need to be there, but I kept on getting forced. And I got in quite a lot of trouble for absolutely just abstaining from going to them. I was like, I'm not going to them anymore. I'd rather do maths.
Yeah.
I'm not going to those. I don't need those anymore. And my mum got told quite a few times about it. I got told off quite a few times about it. My mum was like, "Do you feel like you need these classes?" I was like, "Not at this level." And mum was like, "Then cool, you don't need to go to them. Just tell them I said you don't go to them." And like them trusting me to know what I need
Hmm.
was a huge part. I mean, I went to university and then completely like said no to every single support ever, which is probably a mistake. But knowing that I can do things on my own is like it's super valuable and that's been instilled. So I would like really resonate a lot with that story, and that upbringing is really important, I think.
I completely agree.
You obviously mentioned about the two types of parenting that you get, almost the tough love and the cuddle love side of things. I guess obviously because you've come from the tougher love sort of side of it, how have you found it when you get students that come to you that have had cuddle love and even have parents that are still wanting to be heavily involved in that student experience? How have you found that sort of managing that from your experience versus sort of the students' different experience and things?
That's a fantastic question that I do think needs to be asked more often. So anybody who's listening, write that one down because genuinely though, that's a question that nobody talks about. Because I will say when I first started in this field, the one thing you were gonna, if we had had this podcast 4 years ago, the first thing I would have said is parents are the bane of my existence because and maybe there's still a part of my heart that really, really believes that. But what I see when I have parents and students who come in who are a part of that more like cuddle love, snuggle love type of like mindset, right? Where it's like, I am here to protect you. I would tell you that those students come in with a very low sense of self-efficacy, like a low sense of their belief in their ability to do something. And I think that comes from this narrative that parents aren't saying. So, no parent, well, maybe I can't say no. 99% of parents that walk into my office would never look at their kid and say, you can't do this. But it's the nonverbals. It's the when the student starts to answer for themselves and then the parent cuts them off and goes, well, blah, 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 blah. Because that just tells the student that whatever I was going to say wasn't going to be right. Right. And one of the things that I have noticed, and again, there's no science behind this, but one of the things I've noticed is that more often than not, it's the young men, the boys, the 18-year-old boys who, their mom is like, I don't believe in your, and again, I'm generalizing here, but
Yeah.
the behavior is, I don't believe in my son's ability to be successful. So here is how I'm going to kind of compensate for that. But on the flip side, there's a benefit to that snuggle love, which is that student always has the comfort of knowing that someone will help them, right? So when one of the questions I always ask in my meetings when we're talking about accommodations is, do you know who to go to if you need help, like on campus? Because then I always go into it can be me, it can be, your advisor, whoever, just make sure you go and talk to somebody
Yeah.
if you're struggling. And all of those students who really experience that cuddle love, they're like, I know that I can talk to my mom. She might take over, she might, she might totally blow it out of proportion, but I know my mom will help me.
Yeah.
And I think that security is so important, especially like I'm at a community college. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. I'm at a 2-year community college. And when you're at this space, what a lot of folks are, they see this as like a transition space, almost as like a pre-college college. It's not. This is legit college. But I think a lot of people see it as like a strong learning environment because it's smaller, right? We're not having 200-person lecture halls. Um, and so students can kind of talk to their instructors a little bit more, really get the feel for what college is like. And when they have that parent who is open and willing to help and willing to listen, they can they can get that help, right? And when we have students, and again, I can attest to this personally, that come from more of that tough love background, they're less likely to ask for help, right? Because they're like, no, 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 I can do it. And this again, this is a toxic thing that I personally had to unlearn when I was in college, is this idea of, if I can't do it, then my disability has quote unquote won, right? Where it's this idea of I have to beat my disability. And I see that every day walking into my office of, well, I'm only here. People come to my office to get accommodations and they go, I'm here because I failed. And it's like, okay, like I'm glad that you are here to any regardless, but this is like this dialogue you have that you have failed is incorrect, right? Like I hate to be that person, but you're wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of got off track there, but
No, I think it's a really important point that, and I think it's actually something that I certainly experienced as a student that had disabilities. Is the moment I asked for help was the moment I had reconciled in my head that I'd done something wrong.
yeah,
Not that support was on offer to be able to help me advance, and that actually the system is designed to make sure that you are going to have these peaks and troughs, and the institution is there to help you reach your peaks, but also while you're in the trough, you're not in trouble.
yeah.
I wonder, you sort of mentioned about sort of class sizes and things like that.
Hmm.
The first thing that sort of came to mind for me is obviously, I hear countless times, is it feels like you're sort of jumping off a bit of a cliff when you're a student in higher education versus high school. It's, all of a sudden there's not as much hand holding, there's not that cuddle love there. But if you go to a college that's sort of smaller with a class
Hmm.
size of say 30, it still sort of feels when you're in that classroom like you're in high school. So maybe your guard's down a little bit less. Maybe you're still living in the
Hmm.
same town, for example. You're getting the
Yeah.
same bus and things versus, going out of state and things like that. I wonder, do you think that that's something that you sort of hear from students? Is they're expecting that same sort of support at a community college versus another college, or just in general?
Yeah, I think it's a really mixed bag with that. I think when I have students who come in, especially straight from high school, they really do see this as training wheels college. And I think that there is, and don't tell my office I said this, not that this is going to be like posted publicly anywhere, but I think that there's some truth to that, right? As someone who has gone to university full 4 years, the 300-person lecture halls since I was literally 16 years old, that is truly like 30-person classrooms are a different thing, right? Like when your instructor knows your name, when your academic advisor knows your accessibility coordinator personally because it's a small institution, right? That makes all the difference in the world. And so I think that the rigor of the classes is the same. And so people who say training wheels college, I think they're talking more about the independence.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I really like to talk about when I'm working with parents and students, is that when you're here having this more of a community, the community part of community college is the staff and the faculty. You're gonna have the college level is the rigor of the work. You're still gonna have to do hard work. You're still gonna have to get that done. So if you're coming to community college because you think it's gonna be easier, that's tough. But I mean, I can't tell you how often, like, I am friends with one of the folks in our bookstore, which is, we have a small, I mean, I think we probably have less than 300 people on staff. I think we probably have less than 200, we might have 200 people on staff. And I know those people well, all of them. I know probably everyone here by name. I can probably tell you pretty significant things about each person. Like, oh, I know that this person lives 30 minutes out of town, and I know this person has 3 kids because we're a really strong knit team here. And that's the stuff that students, I don't think, quite see in behind the scenes, where when you go to an advisor and you say, yeah, I had an IEP, and they go, you need to go talk to Avery, right? And they go, oh, yeah, yeah. And they can go, no, no, no. I know Avery personally, right? She will take care of you. She will do this, she will do that. That's the type of stuff you're not going to get out of 4 year. And not this is an ad for community college, because like do what you got to do. But I do think it makes all the difference for those students who have that, what we were calling like cuddle love experience, where knowing that your advisor and your accessibility person know each other and they're going to help keep things accountable. Like, it's huge.
Yeah, I part of my role is working specifically with like smaller institutions. So you're looking at like 3,000 students or less.
Yeah.
And the one thing I hear so regularly is the difference between that. It's kind of like high touch and low touch support, right?
Yeah.
If I know that as a student I can just walk up to anybody in the corridor and know their name and say, "Hey, do you know where this person is?" That is so
Hmm.
much more easy than me seeing people walk by and not be like being too anxious to ask that
Yes.
question, because that's just going to set that barrier for me to not do the
Hmm.
thing I need to do because I don't want to speak to that person because I don't know that
Yeah.
person very well. Um,
Hmm.
in terms of adjusting then, so students adjusting to that, you mentioned the academic rigor of higher education and that self-advocacy.
Hmm.
What what type of things do you do or work through with students to help with them to adjust to that step up?
Yeah. Actually, the first thing that I do, and this is something that I encourage a lot of my counterparts to do as well, is in the summers, I connect with our school districts. And that might be an extra step that at the end of the day doesn't make a difference, but I personally think it does, where I will go talk to our special education, head of our independent school district of our area, right? Or I will talk to, the larger, high schools in the area and their specific IEP coordinators or 504 coordinators. And I talk about, I have a handout that I make sure they all have, and it's the differences between high school and college. Uh, and it walks through what the differences are. And on the back, it talks about things students should know about themselves before they start college. And that's one of those things I say, if you have a student, and I don't care if you as a IEP coordinator think they will get into college, if they tell you that they want to go to college, you should be talking to them about rigor and about the fact that at the college level, we can't change expectations. So one of the things that floors students every time is that I cannot modify their tests. So students will come and they'll have the experience of, well, I have a learning disability. I've had a learning disability my whole life. Since first grade, I've always had some of the options on the multiple choice crossed out for me. So that it was basically a 50-50 versus a 25% chance if I was guessing randomly. And I have to be the person that says, I'm sorry that you had that support for 12 years. You will no longer be getting that support. And then they go, what? That's the issue when it comes to transition. And so I try to the best of my ability, get that addressed before students walk in the door. And hopefully by connecting with those, like I said, IEP 504, the SPED coordinators, being able to say, if you have a student who says they want to come to college, these are the things you got to start talking to them about. You have to explain to them that modifications aren't things that transfer. You have to explain that IEPs aren't transfer documents, right? They end when you're done with high school. So when you're here, we come up with something brand new and sparkly for you. Um, and that has been a thing that I think has made a difference where, a lot more students come in more prepared, if not 100% prepared, they're more at like 50 than at 10%. Um, and another thing that I have taken the opportunity to do is one of our school districts in the area has a transfer fair for their SPED population. And I go to that one to talk to parents. Again, bringing up parents again, but and to explain to them like it is not the same. Your student, because they're leaving college with a certification saying that they can do blah 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 thing, we have to make sure that they can do that to the expectation that everyone else is. But how they do that, right? We can make those, accommodations. We just cannot change their expectation. And people are like, I can't tell you how many people look at me and go, I've never heard it that way. All I've heard is accommodations are what you get in high school and accommodations are what you get in college. And it also gives people the opportunity to go, I want to be a welder. So I work at a community and technical. So we have a lot of students who will come to get a degree in like welding or carpentry or plumbing. But sometimes when after I give that spiel, I'll have parents come up to me and go, I don't know if he can do it. And I'm like, you can do it, right? Reframing that. You absolutely can do it, but it might be helpful to go be an apprentice for a while first, right? Like go into the field, see if you like it see if it's worth the hassle,
Yeah.
right? And if you find that you're like, this is something I feel passionate about, this is something I care about, um, and it's something that I want to start working up in the ranks for, and college would be a viable way for me to do that, come back. We want to have you and we can help, right?
I was really intrigued by so for the listeners, the almost like a bookmark that you've got
Yeah.
with things about the differences between K-12 and community college, but then the
Mhm.
other side of like what you should know about yourself. What are some of those things that you have on there? Because I think when I think about myself, when I was an
Mhm.
18-year-old going into university, I picked a degree because I thought it looked good.
Yep.
Luckily, I enjoyed it, but the only thing I knew is really I wanted to move away from home
Yep.
and I wanted to get this thing called a degree because apparently it would help me get a job. I think that's all I knew about myself. Oh, and I wanted beer. They were the three things
Yeah,
I knew about life.
absolutely. And honestly, like those are some of those things I think are like canon events. You know what I mean? Like every single person who is in high school going to college, you're gonna learn those things as you go through. But coming from the same place, James, is like I had that experience as a young disabled person of going, so I know that I have ADHD and I know that it makes me talk a lot. But like other than that, couldn't tell you, right? Like these specifics about how it impacts me. Um, I can tell you when things are like a problem, like, oh, this is really hard for me and I'm really struggling to communicate, or like, those little bits and bobs of everything. But if you would have asked me to name that, like they do in accommodations accessibility meetings where they say, tell me the impacts, I'd probably be like, nothing, right? Like, because, when you live with a disability, right? Like it just is your life, right? Like I don't think I would ever look at Scott and be like, "Oh yeah, man, like so, spelling's really easy, right?" And you'd be like, "No." And I'd be like, "Oh man, like well, you're dyslexic." Right? I probably would be like, "Oh man, yeah, like Scott can't like that's just not his strength, even if you didn't have dyslexia." So it's this idea like that's just, part of your identity until you identify it as, "No, no, no, this is a disabling thing for me." And here's my little riff that I talk to students about all the time is diagnosis does not mean a disability, right? You can have a diagnosis that does not disable you, but disability is why we use this language. So some of the things on that list are about like, I've had students who come in who don't even know what their disability is called. And again, do I personally, as like Avery in the accessibility chair, super care about that? No. But you as the student absolutely should know that, you know? The impacts of it, like what I was just talking about is like when we talk about accommodations, I'm not accommodating with a giant box that says, oh, you have ADHD. Here's a box of accommodations that are just ADHD stuff. We're going nitty gritty as like ADHD for me and ADHD for you could be 100% different. So let's make sure we're giving you what you need. And to do that, I need to know how it impacts you. Um, other things on here are like, how does your disability create a barrier, right, for you? So we talk about those impacts, right, where it's like, yeah, like ADHD makes me talk a lot, right? That's always my silly example I give. But the barrier that can create is when I'm in like group work settings, is I do not do well in silence. Of course, as the listeners at home can maybe pick up on. And so when I'm in a group work setting, I oftentimes will just kind of go, okay, well, this is my thoughts and blah, 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 blah. And then people go, okay, because there's that little like, maybe she's taking over a little bit when I'm just riffing. I'm just riffing. And, but when students know that about themselves and they can articulate that with me, we can start creating a stronger plan. One of the questions on here are, what are your academic strengths? So another way to phrase like, what are your barriers is, what are your strengths? And another one that I really like that's on here is, what accommodations, if they had them in high school, worked well or didn't work well. That way is another way for them to think about, what accommodations did I already have, right? Again, I can't tell you the number of students who walk in here who have had IEPs their entire life, who could not tell me a single thing on that piece of paper. And I was one of them. So there's this general idea of, if you know what worked well for you, because I could tell you as a student when I was coming into high school or coming into college, I could tell you what I used, but I couldn't tell you all that I had, which in my role at the college level, it always makes me say, well, if you had it and you didn't use it, did you need it?
Yeah.
Right. But if they're like, yeah, like the number one thing I used was blah, 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 blah. That is good and helpful information for me that otherwise students might not have even retained. So those are some of the things. And then I talk with counselors about other things like, how does your student know how to ask for help? Right? Another one of those things, like what things they should know before they start college. They should know how to ask for help. Um, I always have this rant about college readiness where people tell me that college readiness is your ability to do 1+1 or to write a paragraph. I think that's stupid. I think that I can teach you math and I can teach you how to write a paper, but if you're not comfortable asking for help, I can't teach you that, right?
Yeah.
I can try to make you comfortable. I can try to encourage you to do that. I can give you resources, but if you're not going to access those,
It's
you
a skill
know,
for it's a skill for life as well. That I think
oh,
that that's something that often gets missed sometimes in university when we sort of talk about higher education in general. Is yes, you're getting this degree in plumbing, in
mhm,
welding, things like that, but actually you essentially become a project manager when you're doing
yeah,
your dissertation. You're learning how to communicate with lots of different people,
yes,
group projects and things like that. And some of those skills that
hmm,
I learned through that international communication, you've got students from around the world, out of state, wherever that is, that
hmm,
you wouldn't have ordinarily been able to interact with. I think that's something that is so
hmm,
meaningful. And so, yeah, we
yes,
use this all the time when we have new employees coming and working at the company is if you need help, come and ask.
please,
We don't necessarily want to be, do you need help? How are you getting on? Because we don't want to also be going,
hmm,
we're
yeah,
constantly watching you, but we
absolutely,
want to see someone critically analyzing themselves constantly,
yes,
whether that be at
hmm,
in school, in university, or sort of in the workplace.
It's
100%.
it's it's the hidden curricula, isn't it? It's like
Yes.
it's the bit which nobody tells you how to do, and you just suddenly expected to know how to do it.
Oh my God.
It's it baffled me. It baffled me a lot when I first when I first started at university because I definitely wasn't asking for help. I was just going and doing whatever I wanted, and I
Yep.
reproduced. I still do it to this day to a lot of work. A lot of work. I reproduce things that have already been done because I don't ask if it's been done. I just do it
Yep.
myself.
Yeah.
I don't have an ADHD diagnosis, but a lot of things that you've spoken about there resonate a lot with me because this podcast, I am. It's like a whole lesson in trying to keep my mouth shut because every now and then I'm like, oh, I got a butt in there. Oh, I got a butt in there. But I don't. I don't. I let the people talk. I you've spoken a lot about supporting students which are coming from high school.
Mm,
But community colleges also like have a lot of students which have been out of education for a long time. What is that transition like? What do you do to support them, and what are the
mm.
things that they typically struggle with that need the most care?
Absolutely. For what I typically refer to them as like non-traditional students.
Hmm.
Those are the students where I think the most important thing is validating their lived experience as an adult. I think that, of course, right, we do that with our 18-year-old students, right, or our 18 to 21 who are maybe they took a gap year, but they're still basically fresh out of high school. Is like we always want to validate people's lived experiences. But when it comes to the 45-year-old who's coming back to get their nursing degree, right? Who was an LPN for 40 years or whatever, and now they're like, you know what? This is something I want to do for me. My kids are out of the house, and this is my thing for me. I'm taking care of myself, putting myself first. And it's like, get it, girl. Um, and one of the biggest things, one of the biggest mistakes that I definitely have made before, but I have since learned better, is like your not like your lived experience as a disabled adult, a disabled person in the workplace, like that is more important than anything I have to say, right? Now, am I able to just wave my wand and give you anything that you want just because you have lived experience about it? No. But if you come to me and you say, hey, these are the accommodations that I get at work, this is how I am planning to use them. These are the medical stuff that I have recently gone through. Here are the struggles I'm having. What can you do to help me? I'm not going to go where I might, with more of like an 18-year-old student, I might go, tell me more about that impact. What do you think? What do you think your strengths are academically? I'm not going to ask those questions, right? Because they know. And they were telling me even in a way that if they're talking about work and like this is what I do in my workplace, that I can take that information and apply it, right? I think sometimes we get into that tunnel of or that tunnel vision of, we're here to help with that transition, help these baby birds fly. And it's like, sometimes it is just people who already know what they're up to, right? I think another big part of working with adults, like more of those non-traditional adults, is a lot of it's okay that you're here. There's a generational gap in asking for accommodations for sure. And especially when it comes to older folks who are, I'm thinking like very non-traditional, who are maybe here like doing like senior rate type courses where they're like, well, I have arthritis and I've never had an issue academically before, but now I have arthritis and I can't take notes like I used to. But I don't know any other way to take notes because when I was in high school, when I did college the first time, I was a secretary for 45 years. I know I can write, but my wrist hurts so bad that I can't write for an hour anymore. Those are the ones that it's a little bit harder because I almost have to talk them through their own mental block, right? Of you do deserve this just because you haven't been disabled your whole life, right? Doesn't mean that you don't deserve to get support now, right? Um, I think that's a big thing. It's just making sure that they know that they deserve this. And which I know sounds, maybe mushy gushy, but I really do think that with non-traditional students, it is just you have worked your butt off to be here. You have tried, you're finding a way to fund this when you've got 8 kids at home, right? You know, you should, you deserve help. And it's not, and this is another thing that I always tell people is like, this office does not exist because my college is specifically like a kind one, right? This office is like your federal civil rights as an American in our space, right? Like you deserve this. This is your right to access. And if you don't want to, or you want to wait, you have the right to do that too. But please know that I'm not here to just be some like very kind and, you know, like little lady who lives in the woods who gives people little treats every once in a while. Like my job is to make sure that if you need it, you have it. And I also let like specifically the non-trad students know that if you don't need it, I will not be giving it to you. That's my job, right? If you ask for something and I say, well, oh, like, can I get a sign language interpreter? You can hear. Well, yeah, but I think it'd be really cool. No, right? Like, that's my job. And sometimes that just makes them feel like, oh, right, I can ask for things and still get told no if it's not reasonable.
I think it's really good to be able to validate people like that. I think especially sort of when we look at generational differences over the years when
Yeah.
it comes to attitudes of disabilities in general, but then your own disabilities as well. I
Yeah.
know I'm 27, but when I was 18, I was 16, 17, when I was diagnosed with my disability, which is it's basically Raynaud's and hypermobility. I couldn't write a A4 piece of paper without being in absolute agony. I
Yeah.
thought that was normal and everyone went through that. And all of a sudden got given the laptop and my grades went whew, right up to the top. But I know how I
Hmm.
felt as a teenager. Now, for somebody that grew up maybe in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where
Hmm.
attitudes were completely different, I can imagine that they almost have to sell the idea to themselves that it's okay to
Yes.
have that
Yes.
support. And then it's another thing to tell themselves it's okay to then go and
Hmm.
ask for the support and actually
Yes.
go in there. Maybe there's pride involved as well. Like you said,
Yeah.
I've never needed this help in 42 years of my life.
Hmm.
Now I'm asking for it. Obviously, you mentioned that you're never going to give something to somebody that doesn't need it, but how does that outreach go to them? Is it a case of will your office get involved in those intakes for those specific, maybe mature students, for example? Is there a
Hmm.
different sort of approach to outreach than, you mentioned going into K-12 districts, for example, and those sort of fairs? Do you do something similar
Yeah.
with those groups?
Yeah. So not to the extent that I wish I could. And I think that, I really do think that when we talk about underserved populations, obviously there are many more underserved populations, but when it comes specifically to non-trad adult learners, they're a huge underserved resource. Like so many of our services, not just here at my college, but in higher ed in general, are tailored to students coming straight out of high school. Like I think about career centers in general. Like at the college level, like if you go to a career center to get help with your resume or to get help with interviewing skills, there's not a ton in a career space for students who are like, I have a 40-year history. I know how to interview. I know how to do this. What else can you do for me? Right? Like there, and again, I don't know what the answer is there, but I definitely can see that those gaps exist just across student affairs as a whole. What I can say for accessibility just in general is a big thing that I do for outreach here is connect with spaces like our vocational rehabilitation services, which is a space for people who are disabled to go and get workplace support, especially if it's an acquired disability, VRS. I mean, VRS works with anyone who has a disability who is an adult. Um, but specifically, like if you have an acquired disability where you were in a car accident and then you suddenly, lost, you're paralyzed in your writing arm and you're like, wow, I'm an accountant. Like I do computers all day and I don't have one in my hand. Like, what do I do now? They can help with like that transition service. I have a ton of resources and connections there. Our career force, which is another, like specifically here in Minnesota, I can't speak for anywhere else, but specifically here in Minnesota, our career force and our voc rehab go kind of hand in hand, where our career force helps people not necessarily disability specific find work. And those are places that I do probably every other year. I do kind of like a big presentation for. Again, probably not as often as I should, but something we still try to make a point to do of just saying, hey, by the way, if you have a student who like has a dream to come to college, but they have these concerns, this is a resource that they can use. And here's what it looks like. And here's how we do this. And we give all of those counselors that information. And I give them this I'm referring again to that K through 12 versus college, because even though they are grown, right, and they're out of high school, sometimes their last experience with stuff is high school. And so even just as like a jumping off point, as a reference point, I send that with them too. Because if your last experience was high school and you're like, I don't know, I don't even know where to start with college, sometimes that comparison I have on the front where one column has the high school and one column has the college can really be supportive. But there's also in my area specifically, we have like resources like Goodwill, that is like kind of like our charity shop, thrift shop,
Yeah,
that they hire people with disabilities to kind of do the restocking and the checking out. And they have a really great process where they help they get job skills, and they kind of have like a counseling like support resource that they do too. I don't know enough about it probably, but we've collaborated with our Goodwill before to say, hey, if you have students who are planning, or you have people who work for you, or people who are part of your program who have an interest in college, please know that like we can be that connection point for them. I think another thing that, and I'll pause here after I say this, but I think another thing that matters a lot is your recruiters. Our recruiters here are amazing and they are so open to anything where I can walk up to them and be like, hey guys, I have this transfer fair. Let's do this. Or hey guys, Goodwill's having an event and we need to show our face. So like we're gonna go, you're gonna come with me. You know, having recruiters who are down to support those, like again, these underserved populations, and having a recruiting office who sees the value in, people with disabilities being a part of their market is huge. I think that we talk about like, I can't speak for every country, but I can speak specifically for ours is like the spending power of people with disabilities is massive. And it's a completely untapped market because people think of it as being such a burden, quote unquote. And again, I hate to put words in people's mouths, but that's kind of the vibe people bring to the party. And so when we talk to our recruiters and we talk to the people at Goodwill, we talk to the voc rehab people, and we talk to the adult learning spaces for students who are getting their GEDs, right? And we pull all those spaces together and say, we want these students. These students are important. And I know that we can provide them the education and getting over some of that systemic ableism and tapping into that under supported market. Not to bring this into market research because that's way out of my my purview, but it makes such a difference. And to feel wanted, right? And to feel like you have a college that wants you, it makes a difference too. That's something that I had a student in here maybe 2 days ago who told me.
That's
So, yeah.
that's so valid. I didn't know. Like we've got a couple of the team here at Junior, which will always frequent a Goodwill when we're over. So I
Yeah.
didn't know that. So that's super interesting and also like quite warming as well.
Yeah.
I think they're thrift stores there, but we call them charity shops.
Yeah.
They do very very similar things over here as well. So valuable life skills to just
Yes.
be in that working place. We've got
Hmm.
10 minutes left of this podcast.
Okay.
The purpose of the podcast is so that we can help educate others, give other people ideas about what they can do to help better themselves or better their students and
Hmm.
improve student success. So, if you were talking to someone who is just about to jump into the same position as yourself, or just moving into working within the accessibility space within higher ed, what are some of the things you would say to them to help them perhaps professionally and to improve their experience in order to be able to better serve the students that they're serving?
That's a fantastic question. And I feel like I have so much stuff that I'd love to be like, blah, 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 blah. I think that the most important thing is that you will have a lot of people talk to you about being like your empathy is a weakness in this position because of how much we do with the law and how much we have to tell people no, right? Kind of like I mentioned before, is that like it is my job to, if someone's asking for something that isn't reasonable, I have to be the, quote unquote bad guy and say, sorry, can't do that. Your empathy is a strength, and it is a strength that is your strongest strength. When I say no, I don't ever look at a student and go, really? Like you're really asking me for that? Be so for real. Because I have that empathy that I cling to like a life vest. I hear that what I'm hearing when you tell me that you feel like you need your test modified. What I am hearing when you say that is that you have not been given the skills that or the resources to feel like you can show your knowledge to what you know that you can do, right? You as a student, when you come to me and you say, I need my test modified, one of the first questions I ask after that is like, how do you feel about the content? 90% of time, students will say, well, I know the information, but I am bad at test taking. I struggle with time. I need help reading it, whatever, right? And so then I lean into that empathy and I say things like, wow, so it doesn't sound like you would need a content support at all, right? because that's how I say no without being an ass. And I can look at them and say, so you're fully able to do the work. And they go, well, yeah, of course. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. I can hear that from what you're telling me. It sounds like to me what you need is the ability to have your test read out loud. You don't need a modified, you need it read out loud. And I'm sorry that that support hasn't been offered to you before. It sounds like that maybe would have been really helpful to you previously. It sounds like you just need some extra time on your tests. It sounds like, it sounds like you've never been taught testing strategies before, which I was never taught testing strategies when I was in high school. I had to seek that out in college. And so here's how you can do that here. Get those testing strategies now that you have your test read out loud and someone actually sits you down and teaches you how to take a test, right? I think you're going to be in a really good place. And if not, please know that you can always reach back out to me. It is so easy to get jaded and to lose that empathy after years of people going, wow, Avery sucks because she said no. And but I would say that having, we talk about like having, sorry, I'm kind of getting all over the place, but practicing radical empathy is how you make the space like a space you want to be in. And as a disabled person, the space I want to be in is where I am told by the people who have power over me, like that I am capable, especially when I'm asking for things that maybe I don't need because it's coming from a place of anxiety, right? Or when faculty come in and they say, Avery, what in the hell is this? Like, I have this accommodation plan, huh? And they are coming at me not in a space, I mean, it feels like they're coming at me from a space of, Avery, you're dumb, right? But it's coming from a space of, you're giving me this information. I don't know what to do with it. I care about my students. I care about my subject. I don't want my students to not get the information. I don't want my subject to be, mutilated into little pieces that don't make sense. This matters to me. And the minute that, and this happens to me a lot, so please understand that I am not preaching from a place of perfection, where I will get, you can ask my people in my office, I'll definitely be like, man, this person came in and that was really hard for me, the way that they said that, and it really made me feel defensive. But when I take a minute and I approach that with empathy and with curiosity of, tell me more about that. Like, walk me through that. Or what I'm hearing right now is you're really frustrated, right? And I don't want that. Like, I don't want you to be frustrated. Can we figure out a way to do this? Is it 100% perfect every time? No. But if I was talking to someone who was brand new in my field, hold on to your radical empathy like it's a life preserver, because it will change how people perceive you and it will make you feel so much better at the end of the day.
Well, that's a really great thing to end on. I think in a world that's changed so quickly over the last few years from COVID onwards, I think being able to be appreciative of differing perspectives, but also ways of working, ways of seeing the world, is a fantastic place to start in whatever sector of job you're in, whether that is in higher education, in disability services, whether that's in student success, senior leadership, wherever that might be. I think that's a really, really good thing to state. Thank you for that, Avery, and thank you for being here today. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really insightful to understand more about how we can empower students that are coming in to college from so many different pathways, so many different life experiences, and some of the things that we can do as a collective to support them. So yeah, thank you very much. And yeah.
Thank you
Scott,
so much for having me.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you very much. Loved it. Been an incredible conversation.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us on Learning Outcome Leaders. We hope you found the conversation valuable and that it gave you some ideas for how you can elevate your own student experience.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Until next time, have an amazing day.